This in the mail shortly after I moved here, and I've been here 4.5 years now. And her name is Jane Sutherland. So this is what she said. Dear friends, and she wrote this in 2005. We heard from some friends in York that you have taken over the Emig Mansion. It was the home of my grandmother, Flora Emig Dice. I'm enclosing a letter she wrote August 22nd, 1944. She died in August 1954 at the age of 98 years. She was the 9th of the 11 children. So I'd like to read this letter that she wrote, that Flora Emig Dice wrote back then about her life as an Emig in the mansion by an elderly person, written a long time ago. At first I felt sad when I learned that my old home had passed into the hands of strangers. Now I'm not sure who that was, who it was passed to, maybe Mrs. Benedict. But when I learned that you were anxious to know something of its history, I felt better, and as I am the only one left, thought I would tell you something of its past. In 1802, my great-great-grandfather, Valentine Emig, bought the farm across the fields and railroad from your place, consisting of between 100 and 200 acres, then passed on down, and is now in the 5th generation of the owner of my youngest nephew, son of W.H. Emig. When the railroad was built through the place, it cut off about 70 acres, and as my father had a big family, decided to build the present buildings. I was the 9th of 11 and the 7th daughter. I think accounts for the 5 closets in one room. There are 5 closets, the only room in the house that has closets on the 2nd floor. That's what she's talking about. My parents, perhaps, besides their big family, cared for 3 elderly people. The flutings in the woodwork were all handwork, and the contractor had underestimated his bid. As my father was always very conscientious and put his Christianity into practice, I think he paid double what the contract called for. I'd love to know what that was, how much that was. I had many good times in the old house, swinging under the apple tree back of the house and playing or sliding down the hay mow in the barn. The big family, besides caring, brought lots of fun. In 1863, during the Civil War, when the Confederate Army came north, and I suppose were bound for our state capital, Harrisburg, they took down the flag at York. On their way to Harrisburg, they came marching through Emigsville and stopped in front of our house. My sisters and a woman whose husband was in our army had asked to bring her family and stay with us, fed the army bread and milk, etc., as long as things lasted, and had some of the officers eat supper in the house. My father had a country store just next door. Don't know whether the building is still standing. Is that building still, is that the one that's on the, okay. They had him open the store, being Sunday, and bought with their money, insisting he would need it later. I had a tray made from a $5 bill for one of my daughters. As my father was also postmaster, they broke into the store at night and helped themselves. My father was also freight agent, and there was a carload of flour standing on the switch to be shipped to Baltimore to a commission merchant. And since they thought it was for our Northern Army, they were going to burn it. But when he showed them the bill of lading, put it back on the switch. One night the Louisiana Tigers set a guard at each door of our house and made my father and the clerk go to the warehouse and fill their canteens with whiskey, also waiting to be shipped, belonging to a distiller near the village. My father had hid the best pieces of meat in the cupboard of the threshing machine, and as they were picking pieces of meat left in the granary, the officer asked Father if that was all the meat he had. He replied, "You see what is here," the officer said. And the officer said, "Boys, this man has a big family. Throw some of that back." But at night they helped themselves to the chickens. The next day they heard their main army was coming to Gettysburg, and there the 2 armies met and the great battle followed. We heard the cannons from our house, and our clerk went to Gettysburg and watched the battle from a cherry tree. Sad, sad indeed, but nothing to be compared with the terrible conflict now. But I hope some good may be accomplished, and pray that our nation may turn to realize the enormity of our sin and confess our sin, and turn to recognize the God of our fathers, return to prohibition, and save many valuable lives.